Before giving you our next question, I'm just going to remind people listening in and watching you that we have about 10 minutes left. So if you have a question that you want to send us, please do so. You don't want to let the clock run out on you. Juste un petit rappel qu'on est dans nos dernières 10 minutes, donc si vous avez une question brûlante ou urgente à poser, c'est le temps de le faire. Someone here is going back to the Cohen Commission recommendations that said that Fisheries and Oceans Canada needed to do more research on the effects of salmon farming or shut down the industry in parts of BC by 2020. Clock's running down on that. We're almost at the due date. In your view, what should be done?
Mm-hmm. Wow. So, yes, that's a Cohen Commission recommendation, and the government has indicated that they would implement the Cohen Commission recommendations. We did find that the department was doing quite a bit of research, that the question of whether or not it should be shut down, that's a decision that the government of Canada will have to make. Mm-hmm. So we do know that they're doing the research. We've identified some gaps. I consider those to be serious gaps that are very concerning. They need to fix those gaps. It's 2018. We know that the state of Washington and the state of Alaska have decided not to continue to have salmon farming on off their coasts. It's really a decision of the government of Canada and probably the province of BC. That's not something that the commissioner usually moves into in terms of a policy place. We have looked at the agriculture regulations and the whole system, and we found serious gaps that they need to fix.
Mm-hmm. And the 10 risk assessments that we referred to earlier actually came out of the recommendation from the Cohen Commission. So Fisheries and Oceans Canada committed to carrying out risk assessments to address, exactly, for 10 possible risks that they were going to study to look at the impacts on wild fish. And that commitment came directly as a response to the recommendation from the Cohen Commission.
Right. So really, implementation of Cohen Commission recommendations is a government task. Our job is to look at the issue of whether or not they're achieving their objectives set out in either the Fisheries Act, the Pacific Aquaculture Regulations or activities, and or the aquaculture regulations. We look at those, we say, what are they supposed to have done? And we go in to see whether or not they've done it. That's where the job of the commissioner sort of ends, is by providing that information to you and to parliamentarians, and then the decision making is made by Parliament and Canadians.
In your work on salmon farming, you looked at farms on both Canada's west coast and Canada's east coast. Did you see any significant differences, and perhaps can you comment on whether practices are better on one coast than on the other, or are they equally concerning in your view?
I'll let Sharon add to this answer, because her teams actually went to both coasts and saw it. In our report, what we talk about are standards for nets and anchoring systems. And it sounds, from what I can tell, that the net and anchoring system used off the west coast are stronger, and that those standards should probably be applied in Atlantic Canada. But in Atlantic Canada, aquaculture is run by the provinces and not the federal government. So our recommendation would be that our recommendation is that the Department of Fisheries and Oceans Canada go talk to their provincial counterparts and see whether or not they can talk about a national standard for fish nets and anchoring systems. But you may have seen other...
Yeah, exactly. It is a different responsibility. We audit the federal government, not the provincial governments. And so there are many things that are under the provincial government on the East Coast that we were not able to audit. As Julie mentioned, we did recommend that Fisheries and Oceans Canada work with their provincial counterparts on a national standard for nets to prevent escapes, because if there is an escape, it is riskier on the Atlantic coast, because the vast majority of farm salmon are Atlantic salmon. So there can be interbreeding in the East Coast, whereas that is less of a problem on the West Coast.
Yeah.
Just going back to biodiversity for a moment, the report identifies that the decline in biodiversity is a national concern. And it would seem one would expect that you would recommend a national strategy on biodiversity. Was there such a recommendation?
Yes, our expectation is that, well, in fact, there was a national strategy written in 1995, so a long time ago we had a strategy. What our expectation is if you sign on to a set of commitments that you develop a plan, and in that plan you indicate who, which department will do what and by when, and how much money will it cost. When you've done that work, when the government department has done that work, we consider that a solid plan. We do not have a solid plan to achieve the 2020 biodiversity targets.
And just one final question to wrap up here. You've presented 3 reports on very different topics. Of all of the reports and the findings that are in them, what concerns you most?
Well, for these 3 reports, I have to say that what concerned me the most was the gaps we found in the aquaculture industry oversight. I have been looking, since I've been commissioner, I've tried to do one audit a year that looks at the oversight of some industry in Canada. And so we looked, Kim actually did an audit on the National Energy Board and the regulation of pipelines. I worked with another principal to do a review of the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission to see how the nuclear energy was being managed by the Canadian government. We also looked at the cosmetic industry in terms of chemical products that we use. And then we picked aquaculture. Coming up next will be the mining sector and mining effluents. But of those 4 that we've done that look at how the government oversees a particular industry, really I have not been more disturbed than I have been with aquaculture. The gaps, there's so many of them, they're so important. There's no monitoring of wild fish, no thresholds for the use of medication. Industry reports are not validated, no monitoring of the ocean floor required. It just goes on and on. There doesn't seem to be any limit for when the government has to take action. All these, when you add them all up, I was really concerned about the salmon farming one, and I've probably not been more concerned about an audit that oversees an industry. This is probably the one that concerns me the most of all the ones I've done.
So thank you. Merci, Madame Guilfand, Madame Clark, Madame Leach. As we indicated, there are more reports coming in the fall. One will be on marine mammals. We're also going to be looking at risks of toxic substances. D'autres rapports qui vont sortir à l'automne, les risques liés aux substances toxiques, la protection des mammifères marins, et d'autres aussi. Nous vous invitons à visiter notre site web. Please check out our website to see which reports are coming up, and we invite you to tune in again in the fall.